Now, the United Nations has identified sports as capable of assisting in achieving the SDGs, especially SDG 5, which sets out to achieve gender equality and inclusivity. Now, women will play a huge role in deploying sports as a tool for achieving gender parity, to see more women engage in playing, managing, and administering sports at all levels. Now, the sports summit that will be coming up, we'll be discussing in a moment concerning women and sports is in a specially curated session that not all we will be talking about, but we will also promise that the discussion at the sports summit will be one that will be robust and engaging. I have here with me today a woman that embodies that, and we'll be talking about the business of sports and how can we get the very best out of sports. Now, later on this year, we know the Sports Africa Investment Summit will be coming up. And we've been discussing about how do we raise monies for sports in Africa. Because the template that works in Europe and the Americas is completely different. And even Asia, thank you for mentioning that. It's completely different for Africa. Let's start it off from that particular point. Why is that so? Why can't we follow their models? Because we try to emulate them in their style of democracy, in policies, in lifestyle. But when it comes to areas like sports, where we are so gifted and we have the great advantage, we seem not to even understand how to navigate those murky waters.
Simply because, Aaron, and it's a pleasure to be here, first and foremost. It's simply because we have refused to see sports the way those markets see sports. And I'm going to talk about sports from an economic point of view, markets, demand, supply, industry. Because if we don't begin to do that, we'll just be wasting our time. These mature markets that you're talking about in Europe, Americas, Asia, they see sport from a demand and supply perspective. It's about creating demand for goods and services and then supplying that demand. So their focus is now 100% on athletes' development to participate in a multi-sport event. Because if you get the ecosystem right, the athletes will always come through. What we've done here is to spend our money in Africa, whatever little money we have, on trying to produce elite athletes and not focus on the demand side. We do not have a demand problem in Africa. There are over 800 million football fans. What we have not done is to produce the products that those 800 million fans can consume. So we don't have events. We do not have content that are derived from those events. Despite the fact that we're in an IT age and the 800, they tell us how the mobile phone market in Africa is about 600 million, 700 million. And so they're all consuming sport on there, but it's foreign sport because we haven't developed our own sport and sold to this same market.
No, but my whole question is, what role has the political class played in this? Because I will never forget, still a 7th deputy governor once said to me that someone told him at a certain time that, why you put yourself with sports? Is it not just play in his own words? To put it in perspective,
Ministry of Youth and Sports is Ministry of Play and Small Children.
So to speak. Because if the perspective and the outlook still is seen as recreation rather than business,
or industry.
How do we change all that?
Well, we have started the process.
Okay.
You see, the thing is, we also need to get very consistent in whatever we're doing. So the process of rethinking it in Nigeria was about 8-9 years ago, led by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, of which I happen to serve as the thematic lead of the sports industry. And we did the work under the last administration. And first and foremost, at the MBS, we have been recategorized. the federal government recategorized us as an economic sector. So we can get all the benefits of an economic sector the same way the petroleum, the same way transport, the same way construction gets manufacturing gets benefits. We can do that. We can be listed when investment promotion agency is going abroad. We can follow them and say this is what we have. If we have a portfolio of investable products, we can follow the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission and go on those investment drives. Yes, we can. So the government has done that. The government has also approved a national sports industry policy where the policy thrust areas are targeted at the private sector. So but all of that, listen, all of that has been done.
Permit me to interject here because
no, you didn't let me finish.
No, it's not just lip service.
No, it's not.
When we talk about government, no, this is why I say so. When we talk about government and their willingness and their body language towards sports, because I would ask the question, we're speaking about this off the camera. Are they just concluded Olympics? Why? Why is the big question? Is it that Team Nigeria, both for the Olympians and the Paralympians, were not kitted by Nigerians?
Okay, so tell me the Nigerian brand.
I will mention Hagai. I'll mention Owu. I could go on and on.
Okay, so here is my question. The Nigerian brands that are in manufacturing, how many of them have been able to kit clubs where I can walk into, and kitting is not about just supplying to the club to wear. I make bold to say I support 2 clubs. One of them is Liverpool, one of them is Enyimba.
Yes.
I can find Liverpool kit to buy anywhere. I'm still struggling to find Enyimba kit.
Because I don't think Enyimba is being kitted by a local brand.
Because whether they are kitted by local or international, the fact of the matter is Enyimba should make me, I should be able to find Enyimba kit. So anywhere in Nigeria, I'm not talking about abroad, at least in Nigeria, let me find it and be able to wear it. You can't find it. Why? Because that is not Enyimba's KPI. As a club, when you look at our clubs in Nigeria, their KPI, particularly government-owned KPIs, and I say this without sense of responsibility, particularly government-owned clubs, their KPIs are just, go and win trophy. There is nothing commercial about their operations because the government supplies all their money. So until the KPI of a club is geared towards its commercial activity, we will just fold our arms and be looking. But back to the question you asked, at the Olympics, so Nigeria went, we didn't win any medal. And people were shouting. Look, I honestly felt very sorry. I was one of those that didn't comment on the Olympics deliberately.
Why?
Because I think our perception of sport needs to change. And until it changes, we'll keep having this angst every 4 years. So the budget, everybody shouted about 12 billion naira, and it's just roughly about $8 million. I don't want to tell you how much Australia used to just put AC when they got to France and found that there were no ACs in the room. It was about a quarter or half of that $8 million. They used to put AC for their athletes. When Australia hosted the World Cup last year, arising from the World Cup and what they did, Australia has committed $200 million over the next 10 years into women's football. So $200 million, and we spend $8 million, and we think we have money. So we need to kind of take a step back and not throw opprobrium on somebody who was practically handed almost like a poison chalice.
True.
Because we are damned if you do and damned if you don't. So back to now, Africa, in all honesty, didn't perform well.
Why?
At the Olympics. Go and look at our medal count, 1.3 billion people, and we had less than 40 medals. And Great Britain, with 56 million people, was running away with more medals than the whole of Africa combined. So we begin to ask ourselves, what does Africa need to do And the first thing is to stop seeing sports from the angle of going to participate at multi-sport events. That's the killer for us, because all our thoughts are geared towards participating at multi-sport events, whereas all the thoughts of mature markets are geared towards providing experiences for those who will never line up at the 100 meters line, finals line. And that is the millions and billions of people. So they start off first trying to provide experiences to the people, the mass, and then use the revenue they generate from the mass to produce their multi-sport athletes.
All right, you permit me to you just need to hold that thought.
Yes.
We'll go on a quick break.
Sure.
When we come back, I would like to pick your brain on, because certainly you've done a lot with women football and women's sports generally. Why is the anomaly that more women do well for Nigeria than men? Is there a science to it, or is it just...
Gladly answer that question.
I will also be still talking business and sports. Don't go anywhere. You see what Chin, Global Sports Report here on the Rise News. More of this when we return. Don't go anywhere. You're still watching the Global Sports Report here on the Rise News. I have with me here the chairperson of the Nigerian Women Football League and also one of the main drivers of Sports Nigeria and those that are trying to inculcate business into sports here in Nigeria. I don't know how successful that has been, but I want to say thank you for trying, because that's the only way that we'll be able to raise enough monies to fund and bankroll sports here in Nigeria. I wanted to talk to you before so that I don't lose track, because we have a lot to unpack, and especially when I have someone that understands both sides of the coin in terms of business and sports. But before I lose track of that, let's talk about the upcoming Sports Investment Summit coming up later this year. What do we seek to achieve? Looking at how things have played out this year in terms of sports and revenue generation and also disbursement. How does the Sports Investment Summit help realign or probably refocus our goals towards raising monies for sports more than just participatory avenues like you mentioned earlier on?
Okay, so for us, when we started off with Sport Nigeria was really private sector led. And the private sector felt, okay, now that we have a policy that is industry focused, it behoves us to try and do our best to get those people into the conversation that is about engagement. Who are the stakeholders? What are the issues? Why can't we get the funding we need? Why can't we get the investment? What level of reform do we need in terms of administration, corporate governance, management, of the governing bodies first, because the governing bodies need to see themselves as they are the business unit, technically speaking, of their sport. If a federation does not sell its sport, then it can't move. Okay. So we started all of those conversations, and in the process of engaging, we realized that if we have a Nigeria-focused strategy only, it's going to be kind of difficult to achieve, particularly when the whole world is looking at Africa from a global Africa perspective, diaspora Africa plus continental Africa. Even the AU, in its wisdom, has recognized that if you put the whole diaspora Africa together, it will be the second, and it became a country, it will be the second largest country in Africa outside Nigeria.
Wow, okay.
Yes, there are 170 million diaspora Africans.
Okay.
And so the AU, in its wisdom, set up the diaspora unit, the African Union 6th region, to kind of, and they found out that from the diaspora, Africa gets a remittance inflow of $100 billion annually. But it is spent on marriage, education, school fees, medical, build house, burials, nothing that is really tangible. So if there is a way for some of that to be targeted and put into something that makes you and I happy, which is sport. Can we develop can we use them as a trigger, as a catalyst for some of the money we need? But for that to happen, we now have to think of the whole Africa as one for all. And I always tell people, it has to be a one for all and all for one. Nigeria can only rise if it pulls up the rest. Okay. And so, as the big brother, as the largest in the continent, it only makes sense for us to begin to look at how Africa can be better, how the global Africa conversation can pay us. And that's why we decided to host the Sports Africa Investment Summit, primarily to have a place where we sit and talk about how to improve sports. Sports is the only sector that has this wide followership that does not have a meeting point and on the continent annually. Entertainment has a meeting point. They have the Canex. There they are. Let me use local balance. Though they took us put inside there.
I know that sports features.
They put us there, but we're an afterthought. We're like attachment on bus, on those luxurious buses. We need to have our own conversation because we are the largest of the creative industry. Okay. Like I said to you, there are 800 million fans that follow sport on this continent. Any market you go and say, I am 800 million people, must be taken seriously. There must be a way for us to harness those conversations. Look at what are the challenges. The biggest challenge is infrastructure, Aaron. Let me be very honest with you. Across the African continent, we need something in the neighborhood of over 50,000 community facilities. In Nigeria alone, we need like 8,000. And across the continent is 50,000. Across the in Nigeria, we need about 200 new stadiums just to be 1 to 1 million stadium to population ratio. We are 1 to 5 million now.
But with the current reality,
what reality
staring us in the face here in Nigeria?
What reality?
Cost of living has gone up.
What reality?
The price of fuel is very volatile.
Maiduguri just suffered flood.
Yes, yes they did.
Wait, and my heart goes out to them. But let's wait. In another 1 month or 2 months when the flood goes down, let's go to the stadium and watch El Kanemi play. In a cricket stadium, Aaron, I've told you, we don't have a demand problem. We have a supply side problem. We cannot supply the experiences to make our content such that I will sit down and I will watch streamed El Kanemi versus Rangers.
But not to sound like a cynic here. Nigeria has always had this problem.
What problem?
And they call it the Harvard Business Review call it the paradox of plenty. Meaning that for those that have abundance of resources, it could be talent, it could be natural resources, it could be mineral resources, they suffer
from a leveraging of those resources.
Yes. And it's almost the reverse is the case. And those that don't have so much are being able to utilize the little they have, outsource some things, try to bring in some things, and they are far better than the people that do have.
Okay.
And that's the same thing with sports. Because I'm asking, the reason why I'm throwing this line of discussion is, if as a nation we have failed to maximize our potential, look at the oil sector. It's in a mess. We can't meet OPEC quotas. We cannot even have a working refinery that is owned by the government. Let's leave Dangote refinery out of this. A working refinery that is owned by the government, running consistently, consecutively for years. How do we surmount this problem? Because it's still the same problem.
You know why?
Just different denominators.
You know why? You know why that paradox exists? Because we have tended to think that government, it remains for government to say that they are cooking food somewhere every morning. we should appear with our bowls and collect the food. We think government should do everything. Government's role is to set the policy and the incentives. Look, when we started the reform process,
yes,
it was very clear. And I will give kudos to the former
minister. But the PIA, so if we're trying to be relevant, the PIA states this.
Yes.
But it is not existed and it's not being enforced.
Listen, if you know, don't say it's not being enforced. If it wasn't being enforced, you will not be seeing the anomalies. I always tell people, test a document. The proof of a document is, look, my first degree was in chemistry. So they taught us in chemistry. You come up first with a hypothesis.
Okay.
Then you test the hypothesis. And it is only when you have tested the hypothesis, proven it, that it becomes law. So you have Avogadro's hypothesis and the Avogadro's law because it has been tested. So we will write a document, then we refuse to test it. Then we say it's not working. How do you know it is not working? So what we did with the policy is get the approval. First and foremost, get us to go from being categorized as a cost center and small pikin and play to an economic sector, which was done. The government said, yes, that's what you want, take. The next thing, get the policy, it has been done. Get the incentives, it has been done. And the government, to all intents and purposes, let me be very honest with you, the federal government has done what it should do. Okay. Now, let me tell you, the infrastructure gap we have identified. Who is responsible for land in Nigeria?
The state government.
Exactly. So who should be implementing the infrastructure?
But they've got their eyeballs somewhere else.
No, wait. So someone needs to engage the state governments.
Yeah.
And tell the state government, you know, you are really the one responsible for sports development too. And that's why we figured from an advocacy level, Sport Nigeria, start engaging with the states, which is what we're doing. And which is why you will see some states show up.
Permit me, because we are so out of time. I said I was going to ask you the question so that you get an opportunity to answer probably in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Why is it that in the last 2 decades, women have done immaculately excellence? Permit me to use that word. Some might not agree, but the women have outpaced the men and they've blazed the trail, literally. When it comes to sports, and the men are playing a huge cash up from football to track and field to, we could go on and on. The women are just out there. Look at the Paralympics. The world records that were broken and set were all by women. What is happening?
The women for years, and it's really, there's no other, you know, growth is defined. Maybe if you take a bell curve.
Yeah.
So you are stagnant, then one day it's as if you came up. So the men have had the opportunities by keeping the women out. You know, you couldn't play, you couldn't box, you couldn't play football, you couldn't do this. And gradually the women fought and fought and fought and fought. And now the men have kind of stagnated.
Okay.
And that happens with growth. You will stagnate at a point. Then you will now find something to trigger a new era of growth. While the women are growing. The new growth area for every sport now is women. Every sport, because the men have plateaued. They are not going to grow again. So anybody who wishes to grow, focus on women. And that's why the United Nations, you know, as part of its Sustainable Development Goals, identified the fact that gender equality is one thing we want to achieve. And we can use sport. Because why did they identify sport? Because it's an experience sector. So it has eyeballs, it has bums on seats, it has everything. So you will see the women are finally at the table. One of our topics at the summit is a seat at the table. We are now at the table and we are knocking and saying, okay, we are here now, but yeah, this is what we want.
All right, I want to say thank you very much for your time, Nkechi Obi, for speaking to us and enlightening us today.
Thank you.